And thank you for joining us. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis, your host, and we've got an interesting program as part of a series of 2 parts that we've been doing about intergenerational communication. That's right, as we get older, we've got to realize that there are different generations in the workplace. We have to learn how we can get along and actually best serve each other while serving ourselves in the workplace. The most important thing to remember is to be able to have understanding about the other generations and how you can cope and deal with ways that you can work together in harmony. Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is the Executive Performance Coach, and her name is Kathy Condon. And we're going to talk today about intergenerational communication in the workplace as a second part of a 2-part series so that we can better understand each other. And I'd like to welcome Kathy to the Beyond 50 radio program. How are you doing, Kathy?
Well, I'm doing great, Daniel, and this time I'm reporting here from Palm Springs, California, where I'm working on a project. So any of your listeners who are in Palm Springs would love to have them get a hold of me and meet with them and have coffee.
There you go. Now, last time we talked about the characteristics, it seemed, of baby boomers, Generation X, Generation Y, and then I started even toward the end of the program bringing in things such as as I was just saying now, the veterans, and how that kind of works with this newer generation. I'd like for us to kind of go into more detail about what each of these groups are, what they represent, and how they can best be understood. And I'd like to, I guess, since we do a show about baby boomers, start there.
All right, we can absolutely do that. First of all, we're talking baby boomers in the age of 63 to 43 at this point. That's the official designation. And where did that official designation come from? Well, back a long, long time ago, people who wrote the book Forest Turning, and naturally at the moment it's not at the tip of my mind, though I do have it here, and here it is. Actually I don't have it here, but I will definitely be able to give that information to you. So they came up and started studying the generations since 1495, and things repeated over and over again, and they're the ones who named it the baby boomers. And they do know that they have made a mistake making it that big of a group, because the baby boomers is such a wide span that indeed some of the people who are called baby boomers have no idea where they were when President Kennedy was killed. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to categorize, and what I mentioned last time, you've got to be really careful about categorizing people.
Right.
So kind of the things I'm going to be talked about, I want to emphasize that it is generally the case is what we need to pay emphasis to here. So first of all, we are also talking about a group that is 80 million people, and that explains why the baby boomers have been working so hard. They've been out there, jobs, there's great demand for jobs, and it's also kind of interesting. It's happening now because they are, quote, supposedly being retiring, but they're not, and so there's so many people in this age that are vying for the jobs that are available. It's causing a little backlog there. Mm-hmm. But let me give you some of the core values and things of the baby boomers. And number one, they were incredibly optimistic. We're going to come in there and we're going to change the world. And, of course, we're talking, the mid-60s here. And we have personal gratification was really important. What would this be good for me to do? But they also, that personal gratification really came in terms of how can I grow? They're really insatiable appetite for baby boomers to keep on growing. They want to take training classes. They want to be challenged and so on. It's very much part of who they are. And the other big thing that was a switch from the veterans generation, this group is team-oriented. So let's do this together. We absolutely 100% believe it's a team, and we're going to move forward. And health and wellness, even though we kind of think of the 60s when we had all the drugs and going on, now, of course, emphasis is on health and wellness. How can we stay healthy, and how are we going to be maintain who we are, into our later years? And in fact, we're involved in all kinds of movements. We're spending a lot of time volunteering at this point. So does that give you a view of the core values of these folks?
Kathy, you're still there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, it sounded like you were breaking up there a little bit, so I wasn't sure.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so those are the core values of the group.
So now, talking about the core values of, you got the baby boomers, then we move to Generation X.
Okay, I'd be happy to tell you about that. So now we're talking 43 to 28 years old. So we have in that area 46 million people. Notice a gigantic drop from 80 million to 46 million from one generation to the next. So Generation X absolutely believes in diversity, and my belief is that came because, keep in mind, television came into play here. They could see globally things that were happening in the world.
Mm-hmm.
They also want to have fun. They don't want to work all the time like their parents did and the baby boomers. They know how to go out and have fun, and the key thing here is that they plan for it. They are incredibly self-reliant. They don't need anyone else. They can do it themselves. Thank you very much. And I often laugh when I watch my daughters who are X generation. You don't help them with their suitcases. They can do it themselves no matter how heavy it is. Mm-hmm. And they look at me, the baby boomers, and say, well, Mom, handle your own suitcase, because in their thinking, that's how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
They're global thinkers. They do not think just in terms of what's going on here. They're quite techno savvy. But most of them had learned it on their own. It wasn't a part of their curriculum to learn computers from the very minute that they got into high school and stuff. Into grade school. They had to do an awful lot of learning on themselves. Mm-hmm. And also, they can be incredibly informal. The whole idea of all the really strict rules and guidelines and stuff, they're there, but they don't really pay all that much attention to them. So that would be the brief overview of those.
Mm-hmm. Now, what are some of the most interesting characteristics? I know you've touched on those, that when it comes to a Generation Xer, it sounds to me like just kind of leave them alone and let them steer their own course. Is that what I'm to understand? It
is very much that way. They do not want to show up at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning for work and work until 5. Mm-hmm. But what's important is that you give them terrific directions of what you want to accomplish. And this group works very, very well at home. Mm-hmm. You don't have to worry about them. Are they doing their work at home? Because, again, it goes back to that self-reliant piece again. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how they want to do their work. And also, they really don't like people telling them what to do after they've been giving the assignment.
There you go. Sometimes I think I see a little bit of myself in that, because when you consider the baby boomer generation, they were also a generation that was learning, I would say, a lot of their values from the industrialized generations before that, which were people who were used to punching a time clock. And the whole idea is that you work an 8-hour day, so you're scheduled from 9 until 5, let's just say. But there are particular days that you'll go to work, and there just won't really be any work to be done, but for some reason your employer says, but you need to stay here until 5 o'clock and find something to do. And I was thinking to myself, well, there are other things I'd rather be doing, and you're not going to be paying me for the time that I'm not here, so what difference does it make whether I'm here or not? Yes. And that, to me, sounds like what Generation X is saying. I've got the job done. There are other things I'd rather do than sit around and wait for you to decide that you've got something that you need for me to do.
Or else give me something to learn.
Exactly.
It's one of those two things. If you want me to sit here, give me something that can stretch me and help me learn. Mm-hmm. And often that is technology. They really appreciate having technology training and things because, again, they didn't have it at full force when they started out in elementary school. So most of the Generation X, I would say, have had to learn a great deal of this technology on their own. Mm-hmm. It was part of their, depending on what they graduated with from universities. But again, knowing my two daughters graduated in public relations and world affairs, technology classes for Generation X was not part of their curriculum. They could have taken some on the side, I believe, but it wasn't something that they had to do in order to graduate from the university.
Mm-hmm. Now, Generation Y is the one that we're into now, and let's talk about the characteristics of that, because I think as we talked last time, it seemed to be that entitlement generation things should just be done and given to them, but they're actually a lot more sophisticated than that from what you were taught us.
Absolutely. I am really, I can get into trouble because I really do believe in the X and the Y generation so much, because a lot of people haven't quite figured this out yet. But so let's talk about what the characteristics are for sure. First of all, this generation believes in cross-training. In other words, they don't want to learn how to do one job. They want to be able to do a whole bunch of jobs. And think about the advantage to the employer, if indeed that is one of the characteristics of them. So we're looking at industry now that are downsizing all kinds of people, and other people have to be picking up jobs. This generation appreciates that, which, by the way, Daniel, this group is again back to the 80 million, which is right back to where we were with the baby boomer generation. It's the X generation that drops to 40. Now we're back up to 80 million again in this generation.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we're going back to they're really optimistic. We're going to, really do all kinds of great things in this world. They're also very confident in themselves, and I'm sure you will agree with that piece.
Mm-hmm.
And they're also very, very social. As I'm sure you and your listeners have picked up, that this group really doesn't date. They go in groups, and we're going out, and it is very hard to distinguish if anybody is really interested in anybody because they're all totally out there in the world. They are strong believers in civic duty, and that comes again because graduating from high school, you have to have community service credits in most places now.
Mm-hmm.
So they learn that civic duty, and it's a very, very part of them. As far as diversity concerned, they couldn't tell what color a person's skin if your life depended on them. They are really, really just, diversity is just part of who they are, and they just assume the world be made up of all kinds of different cultures.
Very interesting how that works out over time, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. And again, this group would work really well at home, believe it or not, because they worked on their own. Give them the job that they need to do and let them do it.
Just stay out of the way, pretty much.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And what's happening and where the conflict is coming in the workplace is many of the bosses are veterans generation or baby boomers, and this is the way it needs to be done, or it looks like the way it needs to be done. And these two generations are backlashing from that. We can get the job done, but we're just not going to do it your way.
Exactly. So how is it that they, I guess, get perceived as that entitlement generation, as though they're just waiting for people to give them handouts, when in fact they're actually very up to doing the task, to being involved?
Well, it really goes back to what I talked about last time, Daniel, is that in schools, they are giving a certificate for every single thing they do. You do not have to be the top 1, 2, or 3. You will get you'll get a certificate or you'll get a trophy. And keep in mind that has happened to them all of their life.
Mm-hmm.
So they do need attention. And I think what is happening, they need attention, and that, to my view, is the cause of where it came from. So people are viewing this attention that they need to, help them do their jobs, but really what it is acknowledge them as a significant person and a member of the team getting the job done.
I see.
Does that make sense?
So what you're saying is that they don't need rewards in as much as they need recognition, or do they need both?
Of course, they always like rewards. And
sure.
Would you like their favorite reward, to hear what their favorite reward is?
What would that be?
Well, it was great. I was in a class. I was giving a presentation of 300 teachers. And I wasn't sure what the Y generation wanted for a reward. So I threw it out, and we started brainstorming, and it was amazing. It came up with 2 things. They want, if you got the money for it, they want a piece of technology, or they want a gift card.
A gift card.
A gift card. All the people out there who are listening that have been feeling badly about giving their grandchildren and their teenagers gift cards, I'd like to have you think a different way.
That's even better than cash for them, you think?
Absolutely.
Wow, that's interesting.
And you get it in the stores that you know they love. That's how you make it really special to them.
Mm-hmm.
Because they can go out and pick out anything that they want at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that you went to the store and got the card shows your caring piece.
That you're paying attention to what they like and what they think they need. So
exactly.
Okay. So, in other words, because I know some of the frustrations, and I've even shared in these, is like they just seem to sit around and just wait for us to do something for them, and it's like, okay, well, do I give them a job for something to do and say, here, if you could just get this done, leave them alone? And I find that as I've done that as you just say, here's what I would like to see done, okay? And I'd like to see it done by this particular time. And then you go away. You come back, and the first thing they ask you is, did I do a good job? And to me, I found that interesting.
And see, now are you understanding where it came from?
Mm-hmm.
They needed to get the reinforcement that they did a good job because they have been over and over and over that all the way through the education system. And with their parents. Now, keep in mind, the parents keep telling these children how terrific they are because, again, let's go back. So many of these, really especially the younger ones now, have Generation X parents.
Mm-hmm.
And older Generation X parents. And those Generation X parents did not get recognition from their families or their parents because their families were too busy working, coming home late at night, and they were surviving. So the Generation X never got the compliments and the recognition that they did. So now they are carrying those. So I didn't have it when I grew up. I'm going to give it to my children. So the children now get it every 5 minutes, and as a result, when they get out in the workforce, that's what they expect.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting when you said they come and ask me if I did a good job.
Well, that to me, it felt like that was the most important thing they were looking for. Then, if you were to pay them some money as you guaranteed, then that became almost secondary. It wasn't about give me my money. It was about did I do a good job? So
absolutely, and see, that's their acknowledgement that they're moving ahead in the right direction because they would always get some kind of recognition. And frankly, it is always. I mean, I rarely use that word, but I think any listener who has children in school will probably have their, numerous trophies sitting there and certificates, more certificates you can possibly imagine what to do with that their children brought home.
Interesting stuff. I can see how there at times could even be a little bit of these generations in each of us one way or the other when you consider it, and that's probably the mirror that reflects in such a way that can cause, let's say, the generation separation to have the anxieties by saying, well, how come you're getting, I never got that? What makes you think you deserve that? I didn't get that, or I deserve to get this. Why don't you feel that way, kind of a thing. So.
Well, and it really happens big time between Generation Y and Generation X. As I mentioned last time, they don't mix well together because the Generation X are totally, completely self-reliant, where Generation Y has been doing all these projects, working together as a team, and they know and understand team.
Mm-hmm.
So
because I'm sure that would be one of the things that as our listeners are tuning in, they think, well, X and Y, you'd think because they're close together, as the boomers and the Xers would be close together, that they would get along. But in fact, I remember last time you said they really don't get along that well at all. But is there a common ground that they can?
Well, you know what's really fascinating? My sister and I just came to a wonderful realization. She's about to head to China to teach English as a second language for 11 months. Mm-hmm. She went to learn her certification of English as a second language with a group of 20 people. She was the oldest one there at 67 years old. The next thing you know, she found herself gravitating to the youngest people in the whole group. And it wasn't until she read some of my material and she said, oh, my gosh, Kathleen, that's why I've been saying that I want a Y generation person for my roommate in China because we get along so well because those two generations matches perfectly. And I went, wow, that's a real-life example of how the X and the veterans generation, 63 and above, are just an incredible match together. And it's like we've got to have that big separation in the middle of the baby boomers. Well, look at it. We've got, so the baby boomers and the X generation, we have 120 million people in just those two generations. But what we're saying is the generation with 6 million of the Y and the veterans generation put together are the ones that work the best together.
It's quite interesting to realize that it's that simple, and that if you could just understand the communication styles, then it would be a lot easier to get along and actually convey, what your desires are and your outcomes are at the same time. Now, let's talk about, the rewards for each generation, how they receive them, what they're looking for, starting with the baby boomers.
Okay, so with the baby boomers, and I would like to have your readers and yourself watch this happen each time, that you go to an event that a baby boomer is being honored, and the baby boomer will be honored at a party. The baby boomer, the best thing you can do to reward a baby boomer is have a party. And the reason why you want the party is the person will come to the front of the room. They will want that showcase, that moment in the limelight, to be able to thank their entire team. So they use that for the team.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want the party necessarily. They want to have the opportunity to thank everybody that they can.
I see. Mm-hmm.
So
the party's more of a gratitude on behalf of the person being honored.
Exactly, because remember, the baby boomers are the team people.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have the X generation. We move on to that. So the X generation wants to be recognized by themselves. This group absolutely does not like parties. They don't want to be at a party because if you plan a party for them, what you're doing is infringing on their private time.
Mm-hmm.
So what you want to do is bring them into your office and tell them alone what a great job they did. And it's absolutely that simple. It seems like, oh, she's got to be kidding. I have asked baby boomer after baby boomer if they were brought into the office and the boss told them what a great job, would that be a sufficient reward? And they just didn't. And then, of course, to add the icing on the cake, that boss would say, in recognition of this great job that you've done, you get a half day off or a day off,
mm-hmm.
and with pay. That is the ultimate thing for the X generation person, and I've seen companies institute that simple reward system, and all of a sudden you're beginning to get a very loyal X generation worker.
Mm-hmm.
Huge impact. So, and again, then the Y generation, the award system is to recognize them with a monetary card or give them a piece of new technology. And I would say even if you had an employee that had been begging you for some new software or whatever, and you kept saying didn't have the money to do it or whatever, giving that employee the software they've been asking for, they would absolutely be thrilled to death because, again, what that does is it challenges them some more, so they'll stay on the job because they want to keep learning the new software. So,
mm-hmm.
frankly, it's a win-win for the company as well.
Absolutely. It's interesting to listen to the rewards of each generation, and the fact is it's all pretty much the same, is that people want to be recognized as being an important element, but just they want to be recognized differently within each generation. And I think that's really true for everybody.
And the more I'm involved in working in business communication, the more I'm convinced that it goes to the person who wants to feel important. And how does that person want to feel important? Well, I would suggest that the employer ask that person, what do they need to feel like they're making an impact and that we're recognizing it correctly? Because, again, I gave you the generalization for all these for reward system. obviously that's not 100% of what everybody wants. So what would happen if an employer has an employee that just does a phenomenal job and says to them, you know what, you've done a great job. What would make you feel that I am honoring you for the job well done? And you can bet this X generation would tell them in a minute.
Mm-hmm. But would the Y generation do that?
I think they would. I think, well, that's a great question. I'm not 100% sure that they would yet, because it gets back to their helicopter parents, helping them make decisions all along. And you're right. There's even a case that I know of that the Y generation got a brand new job, and they had all these different health plans available. And he came back to his parents really upset because the company wouldn't make the decision for him which company he should go, which plan he should use. Mm-hmm. So they're not as strong as making decisions. But again, you've got to keep in mind, anything technology probably will just send them over the moon being happy, because that has been their world since they've been tiny.
It sounds like Stephen Jobs was certainly a visionary when it comes to that.
Absolutely, yes. He's doing a great job of it.
Well, that's great. Well, are there any things that you would like to tell us about as a final thought about what we've been discussing here today, to kind of just get people thinking about how they can become more aware of how, each of the generations functions? They get a better understanding of, what their rewards are, just the whole gamut of all this, and sort of wrapping it up.
Okay, one of the things that, while it sounds strange, but I think it does help you put into perspective of why they think the way they do. And I frankly was not a proponent of history, and, history's there, but why do I need to learn it? But yet, when I think back on how my mom and dad did things in the house, and I realized that they lived through the Great Depression, and all of a sudden we got a little taste of what that was like here, it starts putting into perspective of why. So I would like to suggest that people think in terms of the events that occurred during those baby boomer years, for example, and also keep in mind that, many of us can remember the day, baby boomers can remember the day that TV arrived. We did not have global influence on things. So it's a number of events that happen in the world that also help people think the way they are. So when you get all righteous and thinking, yeah, but why did they do that? You might want to look at, okay, what was happening in their lives? And, for example, we're also talking about the Y generation and just experienced Columbine high school massacre. Imagine what that did in terms of what they want to learn about safety and how quickly things change. 9/11 is part of their lives, and so on. So events, though we don't talk about it much in terms of communications, really have huge influence. Just had a conversation last night with a baby boomer, and she said, this happened to me back when I was 20 years old, because this is what was going on in Wisconsin at the time, had an influence in who she is. So I think we have been making really quick judgments on people and not thinking and looking at the why. Why are they acting that way? Is there something that I do not know? And I would just like to end with a saying that my mother always said, people act the way they do for a reason. And it is your job to find out the why. And she said, Kathleen, I think you will find it'll be much, much easier to work with people if you understand why that has had such an impact on them.
Well, Kathy Condon, very enlightening conversation on how you can be better and more effective at just as it's so important in communication. You always hear people say, for a great marriage to work or a good relationship to be successful or good work, any kind of relationship, it's communication. But it also, in communication, comes from observing and listening probably more than you talk.
Well, and I certainly would hope that during this two-part series that I got across to people that it is not just AIDS that is the issue. All of the other influences, religions, culture, the global view of the world, events, personality types, all of that works to make a person who they are. So my big goal here would be to have people not go around saying, well, that's because he's a Y generation person or an XY person. And to me, that's just not what it's about, because there is so much that makes you, Daniel, you, Kathy, who I am, that's far more than how old we are.
Mm-hmm. Well, Kathy Condon, again, thank you so much for joining us on the program and giving us a nice, bigger perspective about something that's very solvable and workable at the same time.
Well, it's been my pleasure, Daniel.
You bet. Thank you. And go ahead and give out a website where people can find out more about your work.
It's www.Kathy with a K, Condon, CONDON.info, INFO.
KathyCondon.info. Gotcha.
Correct. And I would love it if people would go to the website upper right and sign up for Weekly Wisdom, and I can keep in touch with them every week that way.
Well, very good. Well, Kathy, again, thank you for being on the program. It's a pleasure.
Okay. Goodbye now.
And there you have it. And just get out there and open your minds and your hearts and find out just what makes people tick. It isn't really about age. It's about who we are and how we work well together. Thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. Be sure to visit us at our website at beyond50radio.com. Sign up for our free weekly e-newsletter and also visit us at our blog. We also do welcome your questions or comments about the show. Just simply shoot us an email, daniel@beyond50radio.com, and that is the number 50 with a 50. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for joining us, and remember, live your day past halfway.